I'm Zal Shroff. I'm the acting legal director at Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights of the San Francisco Bay Area, and happy to give some quick background on why we're here today, the settlement proposal that we sent to the city, and then the status of our case. So starting with why we're here today, we brought this lawsuit to help address San Francisco's street homelessness crisis. This is one of the most important issues facing our community, and it's one that we have to get right. And what's really heartening is that we know San Francisco not only shares those goals, but is also really on the same page about many of the solutions to the homelessness crisis. And you can see that detailed in the letter that we sent to the city attorney's office. But we also brought this litigation because there's been this profound gap between the city's good intentions on the response to homelessness and then the actual outcomes, which have been devastating and have made it impossible for unhoused residents to exit homelessness and get back on their feet. And that's been rightly frustrating to taxpayers and to all residents of San Francisco who want to see an end to this crisis. It's also why a federal court issued an injunction against the city for the mass criminalization of homelessness and the failure to follow its own policies in destroying unhoused people's survival belongings. And so the settlement framework that we've laid out today celebrates the city's proposed solutions to the homelessness crisis, while also asking for accountability to ensure that the city actually makes good on its commitments to help end that crisis. And so we're sharing this proposal with the public because we want folks to know that there are real common sense steps that San Francisco can take right now that would have an immediate impact on street homelessness conditions. And that's something that we all need to see. So just giving a brief summary of the sort of settlement framework we put in the letter. First, on affordable housing. San Francisco has about 800 current supportive housing units lying vacant right now that, if filled, would reduce the street homelessness population by almost 25%. Those units are out of service because of disrepair and staffing challenges, but getting those available units back online would make a huge dent in this crisis. By the same token, there are millions of Prop C and Prop I dollars for affordable housing that have been budgeted. They just haven't been spent. We want the city to use the resources that it has already set aside to address this issue. And then there's the question of making shelter accessible. The statistic is out there that there's only 3,000 shelter beds in San Francisco for 7,000 unhoused residents, and our shelters are at capacity. San Francisco's shelter waitlist had been closed for years, which meant that most folks had no way of actually accessing shelter. But now that waitlist has been open for the last month, and we know that 400 people are waiting on that waitlist, hoping for access to shelter and haven't received a placement yet. We need that shelter waitlist system to include all shelter options that the city has to offer, because right now there are only some shelters that are being offered through that system. And we also need people to be able to access a same-day line to get an emergency shelter bed if a bed happens to open up, because currently there's no way for an unhoused resident to do that. So there are real barriers to accessing shelter to the extent shelter is actually available on a given day, which again is a tall order at the moment. And finally, there's the critical street outreach response. So SFPD and DPW are still the ones being dispatched to police people just because they have nowhere to go, when the city has homeless outreach workers that are better trained and actually able to get people off the street and into shelter if shelter actually becomes available. And the city's own policies talk about how important it is to ensure that we're not just pushing people from block to block, that we're actually creating real exits from homelessness that can end the crisis on our streets. And that's exactly what we're proposing, a partnership with the city where we can help make sure that the city takes those immediate steps we all need to see to reduce street homelessness. And we're optimistic that's something we can do together. I'll just say briefly on the status of our case at the moment, because we do have some important hearings that are coming up at the Ninth Circuit and in the district court in our case. We are really at a crossroads in this city. The reality is that the street homelessness crisis has gotten worse in the past years. This lawsuit is not going to be the be-all and end-all of solving that crisis, even though it is likely to go on for years. And it otherwise will, because San Francisco hasn't challenged major portions of the injunction that has been put in place against the city based on years of data, showing that San Francisco has been criminalizing poverty, has been destroying the belongings of unhoused people. So we need to get real about the permanent solutions to the affordable housing crisis. These problems aren't going away. And this settlement opportunity is an opportunity to look beyond our litigation and make changes for a more vibrant San Francisco. And that's why I think we've seen broad support for that shared vision from the San Francisco Public Defender's Office, from the Law Enforcement Action Partnership, and the other groups that have endorsed our outreach to the city that are named in our letter.